A través del teatro puedo conectar con el público, a contarles las historias o contar las historias desde mi punto de vista y darles crear una ventana para que ellos conozcan nuestro mundo.
E o teatro é isso, o teatro é grupo, o teatro é música, o teatro é cantar, o teatro é contar a história. Esses três elementos estão na cultura brasileira e na cultura latino-americana.
The current project on cultural consumption and identities amongst Latin Americans in London is part of a collaborative piece of research with the CASA Latin American Theatre Festival, the School of Geography and the Centre for the Study of Migration, which is based at the School of Geography. I've been working with the Latin American community for about 12 years now, and I have known more informally Daniel and Laura at CASA, but this is the first time that we've had a formal collaboration. So it's a wonderful opportunity to do a piece of research in relation to the issue of the Latin American arts in London.
I started the festival to create a bridge between the two cultures, between Latin America and British theatre. At the beginning it was a festival of plays in translation, and now it's a festival that brings international companies to the UK, the very best Latin American theatre companies, that is. We also work with Latin American artists who live here and work here, and we help them develop their work, and we work with the community.
I've been working for around 12 years now, basically doing a whole series of different research projects around the role and the profile of the Latin American community in London. The most important research that's been published so far has been the No Longer Invisible report, which was really the first attempt to identify the core characteristics of the Latin American community in London, and also identify the size of the Latin American community in the city, and to a lesser extent in the UK more widely. And so we're particularly interested in how Latin Americans are integrated into the London cultural scene, how identities form, but also particularly how transnational cultural identities have been developing.
You can believe that a certain group behaves in a certain way and sees certain things, but actually this is an opportunity for the very first time to do actual research on the ground and work out what is happening in the community.
There is no difference between like a British theatre and Latin American theatre, just in the play.
It happens with the British that there is not much patience with people with accents.
Yeah. The way I interpret this character is going to be different than an English person just because of my background, and I'm just going to have a different energy.
We've also conducted a focus group which involved using participatory appraisal methodologies with some performers and artists, Latin American performers and artists. And again, that was to explore their experiences of working in the arts sector in London. We're also conducting an online survey, which is obviously a quantitative piece of work, which is, the aim is again to look at people's experiences of engaging with the performing arts in London and the reasons why they do and do not engage. And so this is a really exciting opportunity to link the academic research on the Latin American community from a cultural perspective with the needs of CASA, who are interested in improving and expanding and developing their work on promoting Latin American theatre in London itself.
¿Es la misma frecuencia con la que iba en su país de origen? ¿O aquí va más, aquí va menos?
So we started this research with three main questions. What is the cultural consumption of the Latin American community? here in the UK and specifically London? What are the barriers to accessing the performing arts? So what makes it difficult for people to go to the theatre, or makes it hard for them? Maybe they don't hear about it, maybe there are other issues. And then knowing those two answers, then we can start finding solutions.
¿Dónde carajos es Oslo?
En Noruega, en la península escandinava.
¿La península qué?
Voy al puto norte de Europa, Lola.
In general, when I think about the Latin American community attending theatre, I would say no. I'd say there's very little of that happening. I'm aware of people who particularly like performing arts and they look out for them. The tendency is dance.
In my opinion, and with my experience working with Latin American community, I will say that there is a little percentage of the Latin American community that goes to these events.
Ever since I got to London about a year and a half ago, I've been only once, and mainly because I don't know what's going on. I don't really know where to look into the nice place, and I don't know people that go often either. So that's why I don't go. I don't really know where to go.
I do enjoy going to performing arts events, mainly to see plays at theatres and to see dance performances. And I think I go once per month at least to kind of performing arts events.
What's wrong with this idea? Why can't we find our own identity in a foreign type of art? Of course.
But still, he lives in London and came from the faraway mountains of Peru.
We've got a massive Latin America community here in London, which is very active. There's a lot of things going on. But in terms of theatre, I think it's quite hard, first of all, because of the language. So for actors to do theatre in London, first you need to have the whole knowledge of the language, which I think takes a while to get there. And for Latin America to go to the theatre, I talk for myself because sometimes I go to mainstream theatre, English theatre, and I cannot really understand, fully understand what is going on.
Listen to the cumbia of Andrés Landero somewhere in Colombia.
If you live in England, you have to speak English. You speak English. So the Latin American community needs to speak better English, needs to engage with that. We live here. We can't suddenly want to change the language of the country, and it's not going to happen. So it's our duty as people who come from other places to adapt.
There are issues of language. In which language do you present the work? Do you present Latin American work? If in English, then it reaches a wider profile and it fits into the British theatre scene and is more integrated. But then the Latin American community seems as though the Latin American community is less likely to attend those events. Or you do it in Spanish or in Portuguese with subtitles, which is what we've always done at CASA. But then are you making it more difficult for people from a non-Latin American background to access the arts, and therefore does that affect the profile?
I want the message to be carried to a wider audience. So I do it for everyone really. By doing it in English, I'm doing it to everyone.
One of the key things that is coming out is the fact that it tends to be the higher socioeconomic economic groups who are attending theatre. This applies to Latin Americans and British audiences alike.
Yeah, maybe theatre it is directed to middle and higher classes, but I think that it is more accessible in a way, and there are so many options and the offer is so extended that there is a chance if you really want to see art. I think that Latin Americans who are in a good situation, in a good socioeconomic situation, they do enjoy going to theatre, going to exhibitions, going to concerts. But maybe for people who are not enjoying a good economic situation, going to the theatre is not one of their current needs.
Yes, you can find tickets for cheap sometimes for 10 pounds if you queue in the morning. But overall, the understanding of how expensive a ticket is already in the mind. So, thinking about 30, 25 pounds, so and so. When you start thinking of what can you do on a day off, you probably don't look for theatre.
So there's a question of how do you make it more accessible? And at the same time, how do you put a value on the art? How do you put a value on the tickets? Because you can give everything for free, but then does that devalue the performing arts or the event that someone is going to?
León, la mejor ciudad para vivir, según el lema de la administración panista 2006-2009. Y Forbes México, que lo sitúa en el top de las 3 mejores ciudades para vivir, junto con Mérida y San Luis Potosí.
And based off what I've seen in other cities that I lived in, most of the times the Latin American plays are not necessarily the best ones. And I don't really want to diminish the Latin American cultures in that way, but I mean, you're competing with a amazing city with amazing performing arts.
The other important finding that is starting to emerge is where Latin American and how Latin American theatre and performing arts fit in with the wider UK scene. And there seems to be a tendency of sort of often the performers not thinking perhaps that they're good enough, that London is the mecca of the theatre scene globally, and where do they fit in? And they often think they have a very minor role to play in that wider art scene in London.
I think it's very relative. I don't think it's more or less than the mainstream English theatre. I think it's just different. Back there, like as a Brazilian, I see the Brazilian theatre is very powerful. From the guts, it's visceral. While here is more like polite. It's very verbal.
I promise you, I shall be a little more cooperative than you are. Don't kid yourself.
I'm Latin American, I'm Colombian, I sound like this. If you put cumbia, I'll be dancing it straight away. I don't need to deny this, that is already in me, so I don't need to try to always put that as my presentation card. It's already there, it's part of me. So what I need to focus, or what I think we should do, is focus on the quality of the work, on understanding how the work it's brought to life in the UK, but also, again, as I was saying before, creating partnership with people who really understand it, and understanding and learning from them, and always aiming to create work of high quality.
Raising the profile of Latin American companies here is always going to be useful because it builds a generation of audiences that understand and are excited by Latin American theatre, and that bodes well for the future.
En el reino animal, aquel que no conversa o no está atento a los demás corre peligro de ser depredado por uno más fuerte.
Taking theatre closer to their side would be an interesting option. So instead of people searching for theatre, the theatre searches for them. That, I think, would change the dynamic a little bit.
In terms of thinking ahead, I think what the research has shown is that there is a huge amount of energy amongst the artists who are doing fantastic work, but they need a bigger stage and more support, which CASA is trying to do and is doing really successfully, but that needs to be scaled up in terms of moving forward.
The more experiences we can share, and the more we can raise the profile of Latin American theatre and make the community proud of that theatre, and proud that it's amongst the best in the world, because it is, then we're onto something. But it will take time. But that's fine. That's fine, we have time.